Hello, and welcome to the L&D Go Beyond podcast, where we gather workplace learning insights from experts to enable the L&D community go beyond the traditional. I am Amit Garg, host of this podcast and the founder and CEO of Upside Learning Solutions. This is episode number 18, and today we have a very special guest with us, Kevin M. Yates, the L&D Detective.
Hello.
Kevin, hello. Kevin has been in the training, learning, and talent development space for 20 plus years, working in multiple industries and multiple local and global roles, including facilitation, instructional design, learning solution design, learning technology, curriculum development, program management, leadership development, learning operations, and most recently, learning analytics and impact measurement. That's a whole lot, Kevin.
It is a lot.
Today, Kevin will be sharing with us challenges and opportunities for measuring the impact of training and learning on human performance and business goals. Kevin, very welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to have you on the show.
Well, thank you for asking me to have this discussion today. I'm excited too. Anytime I have an opportunity to evangelize and spread the message and spread the good news about measuring the impact of training and learning, I'm happy to do it. So thank you for inviting me to talk to you today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. Fantastic. Kevin, if before we get into those challenges and opportunities, for measuring the impact of training and learning, if I can ask you, what's the backstory of you becoming the L&D detective? I'm sure I am intrigued. Our listeners would love to know that. So if you could share something about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so as you said there in the intro, I've been in the industry now for more than 20 years and have worn many hats in the industry and have served in a lot of roles and have worked across industries within training, learning, and talent development. And most recently, and by most recently, I mean, the past 6 or 7 years or so, I have narrowed my focus on learning analytics and impact measurement. And it was an evolution into that space and into that work. A few years ago, I was actually looking at leaving training, learning, and talent development because I had served in so many roles, had done so much work, and it felt as though I had hit the glass ceiling, so to speak, where there was really not much else for me to do in the profession. And at that same time, I discovered this discipline that I really knew nothing about for training and learning and talent development. And that discipline was learning analytics. I was introduced to that discipline by Jack and Patti Phillips with the ROI Institute, who have a methodology for measuring return on investment for training and learning and talent development. And that was something I really didn't know anything about. And it was intriguing. I was very curious about it. And it prompted me to want to stay in the training, learning, and talent development industry and stay in a way where I could focus on something that I knew nothing about to kind of re-energize me and re-energize my career. And that's how I got into measurement and learning analytics. And so over time, because I have been so focused in that space and in that work, people have often said to me, "Hey, Kevin, you're like Sherlock Holmes because you're investigating, data and facts, and you're trying to solve measurement mysteries." And so I said, well, I guess I am kind of like Sherlock Holmes, right? And so that's how I became the L&D detective.
Very interesting, very interesting. And thank you for sharing that, uh, you were, hitting a glass ceiling in a way.
Yeah,
You wanted
yeah.
to quit the domain in some form, but analytics brought you back. So that should be very interesting for a lot of people who've been in the domain for 10, 15, 20 years. Uh, and maybe they are also not into analytics as much as they should be. So I'm sure this is going to be an interesting conversation.
I hope so. And I think that, it's also a story about finding ways to re-energize and re-engage yourself in your career. And, again, so my example was one where I thought that I had done all that I could do in training, learning, and talent development, but the truth is that I had not. So I hope that inspires others as well, and, in their industries and in their careers that, there's always opportunity to find ways to re-energize and re-engage yourself. And for me, I was re-energized and engaged through measurement and training and training and measuring the impact of training. Yeah.
Sure. Excellent. Excellent. All right. So let's get started. And if I can ask you in this conversation, the challenges and opportunities that you're going to share with us, who are you trying to address? Is it the senior folks in the organization outside of L&D? Is it the senior L&D people, or just everybody who's related to L&D?
That's a great question, and what a really great way to start the conversation. So if I were to rephrase or restate your question, I think what you're asking is who are the stakeholders, who are the people who are vested in measuring the impact of training and learning, right? Who are the benefactors of data and narratives and stories that talk about how training and learning is measurably impacting human performance and business goals. So who's interested in that, right? Who are the stakeholders and who are the vested parties? And I would say that it reaches across the spectrum because the outcome of measurement serves a purpose for different types of roles in an organization, depending on where you sit and where you are. So for senior leaders and executives, the C-suite, I believe that they are most interested in hearing how training and learning is driving business goals and how training and learning is driving performance outcomes for people and teams. So for that segment of the population who is vested in that impact story, those senior leaders and executives, I believe that they want to see data and facts and evidence that show how training and learning is measurably either changing behavior, actions, and performance, or sustaining it. Because that's another part of the story we don't talk about a lot. The fact that we aren't always looking for a change, right? We aren't always looking to move the needle. Sometimes training and learning can be a great solution for maintaining and sustaining performance in a business measure, right? So that's important. So the senior leaders and executives want to hear most about that story. And then there are individuals who are embedded in the training and learning team who can use impact data and learning analytics to inform decisions for instructional design, for facilitation, for operations, and senior learning executives, chief learning officers, vice presidents and such. They want to be able to use training and learning data, I believe, for two purposes. The first purpose is to gain insight on operational efficiency of the function, training and learning. And then I also think that they want to hear the story about how training and learning is impacting business goals and human performance as well. So to answer your question, who are we targeting with our stories and our data and our metrics and our measures for the impact of training and learning? There are multiple audiences. And then the stories that we tell about impact should be specific to whoever that audience is. Does that answer your question? Does it make
It
sense?
does. It does. It does. It's a great answer, and I really like you mentioning about the sustaining part, because very often that gets missed, and we think it is only about changing a certain behavior or increasing or decreasing something, but sustaining is an equally important thing when everything is going well. Yeah.
Such an important point, and I am spreading that message a little louder and a bit more, because I think that we often get caught up as training, learning, and talent development professionals. We often get caught up in the idea that we're always looking to make a change, and sometimes we are, and that's fine. I just don't want us to miss the idea that sometimes training, learning, and talent development solutions are great solutions for maintaining and sustaining. So we shouldn't forget about that. So I'm just trying to make sure I talk about that a lot more.
No, excellent, excellent. I mean, I haven't been thinking about it that way, but so thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah.
All right, Kevin, let's get started with, what are your top challenges and opportunities that you see with measuring the impact of training and learning?
Yeah, there are a few. And the good news for me is that I believe for every challenge there is an opportunity, right? And so as I think about where I believe the biggest challenge is for measuring the impact of training and learning, and how that challenge plays itself out in our community, I believe it's not proactively thinking about an outcome, right? So here's what I mean by that. I think that quite often we are viewed as a fulfillment center
Yeah.
where there are, people who place their order for training and learning, and then we fulfill that request. And a lot of times, and I've said this so often, but a lot of times it feels as though we are working in fast food, right? So because someone will come to us and they'll say, I'd like one e-learning, two virtual instructor lids, one ILT, and a side order of performance support.
Yeah.
And so then we go off, we get that order, we fulfill the order, and then we give it back to the person who made the request. Well, that's very transactional,
Yeah.
right? And in that kind of conversation, there's no opportunity to talk about what expectations are for outcomes, and most important, how we can measure the extent to which those outcomes are achieved.
Yeah.
So for me, the biggest challenge is not being proactive about defining impact, right? See, I believe impact is what you define it as.
Yeah.
And when you're able to define it, you're then able to measure it. So where we have an opportunity to do a better job is proactively thinking about what impact is so that we can plan to measure it, after the training and learning solution is consumed and designed and launched, right? So I think that we just have to do a lot more proactive planning and a lot more proactive thinking, right? Yeah, it looks as though you want to share something there.
Yeah, very interesting. Over the last few podcasts, I've heard this, point made by several speakers, and just marrying different adjectives that people have used. I have started calling it, the transition that we need is from a waiter L&D to a doctor L&D. So it was used by two different people, but it just summarizes it. Of course, it doesn't sound very nice. It actually hurts. As an L&D professional, it is not a very kind phrase, but I think that's the reality. And if you are raising it as a number one challenge, I think it's time we take notice of that.
Yeah, and I think that it is the number one challenge because so often I see where reactive impact measurement really results in not finding any answers.
Yeah.
It can be very frustrating. And having a reactive response to measuring impact just really puts you at a disadvantage. So what happens more often than that is our training and learning solutions are designed and then they're launched, consumed, and utilized. And then the question is, well, what's the impact?
Yeah.
Well, I have to go back and say, well, what was the intended impact? So if we proactively know what intended impact is, again, before that solution is pushed out and people are using it and utilizing it, if we know what that is in advance, then we are better positioned to measure impact. So it's having a proactive approach versus a reactive approach. It's almost as if we've taken a post-mortem approach to measuring the impact of training and learning. And I'm suggesting here with our number one challenge that, again, before we even have any conversations about what the training and learning solution is going to be, let's have some conversations around intention and purpose. What does performance look like when it is good? What does performance look like when it's not good? What are some of the risks? What are some of the challenges? And again, ultimately, what are the business goals? What business goals are we trying to support? So I think that when we have those types of conversations up front, we're in better position to measure impact in the end. And what's also interesting as I think about it and hear myself say this is what I and others have been saying for years, right? What we've been saying for years is let's begin to think about business needs first, performance outcomes first, where we want to support the business in changing or sustaining something first. We've had this conversation so often and so many times, and so I am hopeful that maybe this time next year, if we have the same conversation and you ask me, what are the challenges and opportunities, maybe I won't say that not being proactive is the biggest challenge because we know what we should be doing. I just don't think we're doing it enough.
You gave me a good new phrase, and I have a follow-up question as well. But from post-mortem analytics to proactive analytics, that's where we are really looking to transition, hopefully.
Yeah, and post-mortem impact analytics may work in other disciplines and other areas. I just don't see where that methodology works as well with training, learning, and talent development, because it's almost as if you're shooting arrows in the dark by looking for something, right? Versus knowing what you're looking for before you're looking for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
The likelihood of finding what you're looking for when you know what you're looking for, and being successful with that is highly likely, right? But when you don't know what you're looking for and you're looking for it, you might not be as successful. And so the same is true, I believe, for measuring the impact of training and learning.
Absolutely. All right. So, Kevin, when you say, the focus on impact, when we start a program or any initiative, how would you want to define impact itself? Are you looking for necessarily business results? Are you looking at behavior change? Uh, I think a lot of L&D people find it very difficult to get to that stage itself, defining the impact. Maybe they don't do it correctly, maybe they don't have the right support. So is there an opportunity here for them to improve that thing, to address this challenge a little better?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that one of the things that we can do a better job at is relieving ourselves of the idea that we have to define impact on our own, because that's another reason why I believe it's difficult, has been difficult, because for me, the training, learning, and talent development team is not solely responsible for defining impact. I believe that we define impact in partnership with our business partners and our stakeholders and those who are requesting training. If it's left up to us, the training, learning, and talent development team, to define impact, that puts us at a big risk for not being in alignment and agreement with business expectations,
Yeah, yeah.
or stakeholder expectations, or partner expectations. So I think that one of the reasons it is difficult to measure impact is because there isn't always a clear definition for it. And even then, when the training, learning, and talent development team defines impact on its own, we may not be measuring the right thing, right? And so I think that one of the most exciting opportunities there is for us to, again, just engage differently with our business partners and our stakeholders. Because it goes back to that first point that I spent so much time talking about at the beginning. If we aren't clear about what impact is, it's just going to be difficult to measure, right? And then if we are defining impact on our own and trying to measure that, we run the risk of measuring the wrong thing, because we don't have the perspective, the input, and the buy-in from our business partners and our stakeholders who are relying on us to provide training and learning solutions that are supporting a business goal or supporting a need for either changing, maintaining, or sustaining human performance. Does that answer your question? Did it make sense?
It does. It does. Of course, but there's a follow-up question I have on that.
Please.
I completely understand that, L&D alone can't do it. And you said this is your probably one of the other challenges that you wanted to put up or share with. But are we getting into the area of the culture of learning in an organization, or a distributed accountability of learning in an organization, which would be part of culture of learning? And that is something that gets formed over years and necessarily needs to be driven by the senior management. And if it is not the case, then we go back to the first question where we say L&D is often seen as, people who are serving. And so business stakeholders are just coming and giving you orders, but are not interested in giving you or sharing that responsibility of defining impact with you. So are we getting into that area of first looking at the culture of learning, or the general culture in an organization of shared responsibility, accountability towards learning objectives?
I think you've just hit the nail on the head. I really do. Because we are talking about culture. We are talking about traditional versus non-traditional ways in which we've engaged. And by we, I mean training, learning, talent development, business partners, stakeholders, senior leaders, et cetera. I think that there is a deeply embedded historical culture that revolves around training, learning, and talent development being transactional. And it's just been difficult to break that mindset over the years because it still exists. So there are challenges with engaging business partners and stakeholders in discovery-based conversations versus order-taking conversations, right? Because there's a big difference between the two. And the culture for where it has been over the past decades is the order-taking relationship, right? What we want to move over to is a culture of discovery-based engagement and conversations that give deeper insight into business needs and performance needs.
Yeah.
There's a big difference between those two things that I just described. So to answer your question, yeah, definitely culture plays a role. And I just think that we have to be committed to supporting the business in having those different kinds of conversations, because it's not easy. It's not easy for us because we aren't used to having those types of conversations. So certainly it's not going to be used to our business partners and our stakeholders and those whom we support, because they are historically and traditionally used to that transactional order taking relationship. And so that's a need for a culture shift and a culture change for sure. So I'm glad you called that out.
Thank you. Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. Of course, I see that happening too often, and yeah, I think that it's a bigger puzzle to solve than just looking at it in isolation.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so when you say so we have covered maybe 3 challenges or just 2 right now. One is defining
We're up to
impact.
2.
2, and not defining it in in a silo, right? It has to be defined alone. Okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
So let's say if somebody has been able to do this, overcome these 2 challenges, are there other challenges that they can face or they do face?
I think another challenge is, and maybe it's not a challenge, but we'll just use that word. I think that what we need to be clear about is knowing that we can't measure impact for everything. Right? I think that that's a challenge. I think that there's this perception that we have to measure impact for every training, learning, and talent development solution. I just don't know that that's a realistic expectation, right? I think that depending on the organization in which you work, the volume of training, learning, and talent development solutions that are available and that are being used and consumed just doesn't lend itself to the proper impact measurement, right? I think that you have to be selective. And I think that you have to choose those training, learning, and talent development solutions that are really targeted and most likely to produce an outcome. And then those are the ones that you pursue impact measurement for. Because again, the idea that we can measure impact for everything, I just don't believe that that is a realistic view. Now, if you work in an organization where you have endless resources, great, go for it. But I haven't met anyone or seen any training, learning, or talent development organization that
Maybe
has
one
endless
organization
resources.
like that.
I'd love to see it. I haven't seen it yet in my 20 plus years. I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
So I think that we do have to be very selective and deliberate and intentional with where we make our attempts to measure impact, because to think that you can measure impact for everything it's just an unrealistic expectation, and I'm here to tell you that.
No, thank you for sharing this one. I think this will free up a lot of L&D people from the burden of thinking, oh, when I get to start doing learning analytics better, I have to do it for all the programs, and probably that is holding them back. Sometimes they don't want to get started because there's so much to do. So just being selective can be a good starting point, gives them confidence that even the best, like you, are not really going after everything that they do in terms of measuring impact of that.
Yeah, I agree. Yes. So this is one of those times where I believe less is more. Yeah, I do.
So strategically selective and tactical is probably the way to get started.
Strategically selective. I like that. Yeah. Can I borrow
that? Fantastic. All right. So let's say people have, the first 3 challenges covered, and they have selected a few programs. can they still face some challenges? Are there mechanics
Yeah,
involved which people can get wrong, or something else can go wrong, or they don't
yeah,
know how to do it?
yeah. And you know what? I wouldn't necessarily say something else can go wrong, but this fourth idea that I have in my head around challenges is around talent, right? So I believe that measuring impact for training, learning, and talent development is, it's an art, it's a talent, and a skill, right?
Okay.
And not everyone can do it, and that's okay
Mm.
because again, it's an art, a talent, and a skill. So another challenge that I believe exists with training, learning, and talent development teams is not having dedicated roles or the expertise or the people who bring the capability to combine learning data and business data and analytics and insight and scientific models and all the things that need to come together so that you are telling a credible, reliable story about results and impact for training and learning using data methods, analytic methods, and scientific methods, right? So I've just described what I like to call a talent profile for an individual who can support the training, learning, and talent development team. And the best case scenario with all of those qualities that I just described is someone who also has a background in training, learning, and talent development. I mean, that's the best case scenario. You can't always find all of those skills wrapped into one. But when you do, boy, have you hit the right spot in terms of having an opportunity to really measure impact and have the right perspective when you do it. So for me, I think one of the challenges and opportunities is just not having a role on a training or a learning team that is focused on impact measurement and impact analytics because it is a unique skill set. I mean, let's just tell the truth about that. It is a very unique skill set. And it is a talent profile that I have seen emerge over the past, oh, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, where I'm seeing more and more organizations are hiring for that kind of role. But there's still so many who just don't have that type of role on their team. And I think that that's a challenge because, again, measuring impact and using data and analytics to do it is an art, a science, and a skill. And it requires a very specific skill set and a very specific talent profile. And not having that, I believe, is a challenge.
Interesting. So, Kevin, since you mentioned all of those skills that are needed, and
Yeah.
also it would be good if somebody has background in L&D, sounds like it'll be a good idea to upskill people who are already in L&D, or do you see it normally works better if you hire from outside?
That's a great question. I've seen it work well both ways, right? So I'm an example of someone who was upskilled because my background is not data science, analytics, measurement. I just saw the look on your face. It was a look of surprise. And so, no, my background is training and learning. I mean, it is what I was prepared for, academically, with a master's degree in curriculum instruction, with my work over the years really being focused on some of those things that you mentioned earlier, curriculum design, learning operations, learning administration, learning solutions, high potential, high leader development and training. That's really the core of my background, right? So out of curiosity, I have upskilled myself into the learning analytics space, into the measurement space. So again, that is not where I was academically prepared and trained. It is not, a deep rooted part of my background. It is something that I have evolved and grown into. So I'm a good example of upskilling into this space, right? So to your point, I think there's opportunity on a few spectrums, right? So as training, learning, and talent development professionals who are interested in learning analytics and impact measurement, yes, you can upskill into that space. And again, I'm a good example of that. But then there are some, and I've met a few who just happen to have, like data backgrounds and scientific backgrounds, but who also have some history or some experience in training, learning, and talent development. So they just brought those two together. So I think that when we think about that talent profile that I described, that we're thinking about here, it can evolve and show up in talent in many different kinds of ways. And again, I'm an example of how it can show up through upskilling. And then there are others who already have that experience and who just bring it to the table, and who are ready to do the work, when they arrive.
Fantastic. You are going to inspire a lot of people today.
I hope so.
Number one, somebody who's seen a lot of learning and talent for 15 years and wanted to quit, remained here. Uh, and also, I really appreciate admitting that you did not know a lot about learning analytics till 5, 7 years ago. So there's no stigma attached to that, right? Second, you're talking about,
Absolutely.
yeah, absolutely. We are
Absolutely.
into L&D, learning and development. We should be looking at learning and upskilling almost always, right? And if we can't do it to ourselves, it is very difficult to think of others doing it when we tell them to, or we support them to.
Yeah, and I think that there's an opportunity for transparency, right? So for me, I think I know a lot, but I don't know everything. And so that means for me that I am constantly upskilling. There are still things about measurement, data, and analytics that I don't know that I want to know more about. And so I am constantly pursuing opportunities to educate myself and to grow in those areas. So while I am extremely grateful and humbled by how the global learning and development community has embraced me, and sees me as an expert in my domain and the work that I'm doing. And I appreciate that. And it's a responsibility that I take very seriously, knowing that, people listen to what I have to say and people are interested in what I have to say. So I have to be very responsible with that. I also think it's important for me to be, responsible and transparent. And the transparent part of that is, I am focused on measuring impact of training and learning. I have written an ebook about that. I am doing that work. But there are days where even the L&D detective, there are days where I scratch my head. There are days where I'm not certain. There are days where I'm not clear. But it's those days where I just decide to dig in my heels and remain committed to finding the answer. So even though, we've talked about all those skill sets and those capabilities that I believe are required to be successful with measuring impact, I just want to be clear in saying that, it's not easy, but that's okay. You just have to be committed to doing the work.
Right. No, that's very inspiring, Kevin. And once again, thank you for sharing that. As I said, I think it's going to be very inspiring for a lot of people because they might just think it is, a lot of time that I've already spent. I can't really get into it. In fact, there was another speaker on podcast series a few episodes ago, and she wasn't interested in maths a lot in her early days. But then she's also recommending all of us in L&D need to know something about analytics. You may not be that analytics person, but if you don't understand anything about it, you'll not be able to really survive going forward. But
Yeah.
that's excellent. And also, I was talking about a couple of other points that I think you're going to inspire people on is definitely telling people to be selective. That's a big one in my view.
Yeah.
No,
I agree.
and third is upskilling. Because I think that can be really inspiring for people to say, we can get upskilled ourselves. Fantastic.
Absolutely.
I'm loving it.
Absolutely.
I'm loving it. All right. So let's say we have somebody who knows analytics on the team, and that kind of takes care of most of the challenges. Any other challenges that teams can still face when they have to do real impact analysis of analytics of training and learning?
Yeah, I think that another challenge, is this idea that it's going to be easy, right?
Mm,
That measuring impact for training and learning is going to be, something that we can do very quickly, very easily. And the reality is that depending on how you define impact, and the further along you go in terms of defining impact as a measurable outcome for performance and for business goals, when you get to that end of it, um, it can be difficult. So I think the challenge is, maybe not always being transparent about that truth or always saying that out loud. So I'll say out loud, and I just kind of touched on a little bit in our prior talk there. Measuring the impact of training and learning can be difficult, but it is absolutely possible, right? So I think that one of the challenges that we need to just acknowledge is just say it out loud, right? Because measuring impact for training and learning can feel ambiguous, unsure, and uncertain. It could feel like you're going down a path where there really is no answer. I've experienced that. I definitely experienced that. But the reality is that measuring impact for training and learning can be difficult. It can feel unsure and uncertain, but it is absolutely possible. And what makes it possible are some of the things that we talked about earlier, right? So proactively defining impact, being clear about metrics and measures that you're going to use to measure impact, having the right talent on the team to support impact analytics and measuring impact. Those are the things that are going to make it less difficult, right? So again, I think that, another challenge that it's okay to call out, right? Is to just say it, right? Measuring impact is not always easy, but I do believe that it's always possible. Yeah,
Yeah, thank you
that
for
makes sense.
calling that out. Yes, it does. It does. Some of the people may think, it is easy when they get in, and maybe there is a reason why they think it's easy because maybe they're not measuring the right things. Very often, and I don't know if you included that in your response earlier. Very often, L&D teams may be measuring for efficiency of L&D operations rather than effectiveness of training programs. So, how many people got trained for the same budget this year vis-a-vis the last year? Something like that. How many people completed a program, etc. So,
Yeah.
all of those are indicators of efficiency. May not be the
Yes.
best indicators of effectiveness. So till we are on this side of the table, the efficiency one, maybe it may seem very easy. So is that also something that you are alluding to when you're saying easy versus difficult?
Yes. And so you've raised a good point here because what I don't want to give our listeners and our watchers the impression, I don't want to give anyone the impression that operational metrics and operational data for training and learning is not valuable, because it is, because that gives us insight, as you said, into the efficiency of the function of training, learning, and talent development in the business, right? So, the modalities through which we offer training and learning, the number of hours that people consume and utilize for training and learning, the amount of hours that people are consuming, that gives us a good view into the efficiency of our training and learning solutions. So let's not throw that data away, but let's not use that data in isolation of itself and by itself to try to tell an impact story, because that's not impact, that's efficiency, right? That's operational efficiency. So I think that where we are able to do like the greatest benefit to the impact story is to combine that operational efficiency data with learning effectiveness data, which is really the impact story. So when we're able to combine all of that data to tell that one story about the impact of training and learning, I think that that's where we're doing our best work. So again, don't want to give anyone the idea that we should not pay attention to the operational data. We do need to pay attention to who we tell that story to, right? I don't know that a senior leader or executive is as interested in hearing about how many people we trained and how many hours of training people completed as he or she would be interested in hearing a story about how training and learning measurably help the business achieve a business goal. Yeah.
Very interesting point, Kevin. And it took me back to something that I was reading recently. This was by Clark Quinn talking about his in his book on myths and misconceptions about learning models, etc. And he was talking about the KickPatrick model. And the thing that he mentions about there is the whole concept of using KickPatrick has been uh, kind of not used properly. So the idea is to use it from level 4 downwards, and most people are using it level 1 upwards and
Mm,
possibly stopping at level 1 and 2 only. So they never go to there. But the idea is that you definitely think about level 4, come down, come down, come down,
yeah.
and have all of them. And hence, what you just said also makes sense and fits in perfectly. Some data is useful for some set of stakeholders, and the other data is useful for some other all of them are important. I think, the biggest challenge we all face is that when we stop at level 1 and level 2 and don't go beyond that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, you've just identified a challenge yourself. And it's true. I think that, if we contextualize this using the KickPatrick model, yeah, more often than not, we get through level 1, we get through level 2, but we really don't take it further. So yeah, that's a challenge also. Yeah.
Fantastic. Also, you just talked about, it's not easy, it's not impossible, but if I may add, it is actually critical. If we don't do it, I think we are looking at, compromising our own survival as an L&D community. Because what are we really showing for results if we are not measuring impact? And that's why, and I really don't like when an HBR article says there is a great training robbery happening. It's not a good reflection at all. And I think it should hurt all of us. And it does, I'm sure, deep down. But, if I may just add, it is critical.
Mm. I agree. I agree with that. I think it's critical, and some people say it's critical because it helps to demonstrate our value, right? If we have facts, evidence, and data that shows how our training and learning solutions are measurably supporting business goals, then it just demonstrates our value. I get that. I get that. And that is, I suspect, one good reason for measuring impact for training and learning. But I also think that through impact analytics and measurement data for training, learning, and talent development, we also get data that informs decisions, answers questions, and if we do it the right way, predicts outcomes, right? So there's a little bit of predictive analytic capability there as well. So it's like, when we do this, we can expect to see that, right? And then that would be based on data that we've accumulated and collected over time that helps us make those types of predictive outcomes. So those are the reasons that I believe measuring impact, and why I believe impact analytics is critical, because the results in the data, again, it informs decisions, answers questions, and helps to predict outcomes. So for all of those reasons, I believe it is critical. Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. You just used a term which, I was about to come to, and possibly this fits in here very well, which is predictive analytics. Do you see stages of maturity when it comes to, learning analytics in organizations? And is predictive analytics the, the really the last stage or the most mature stage?
Yeah, I've seen different models that kind of play out levels of maturity.
Mm.
And so because of the evolution of performance, the evolution of science, the evolution of technology, I don't know what the end state is, right? At this point, I really don't know what the end state is. If we think about a continuum and a maturity model from end to end, I think I know where the beginning of the maturity model is. And the beginning of the maturity model, I believe, is one where you're not going beyond level 1, right?
Yeah.
So then, in terms of what that looks like on the other end of the maturity scale, the farthest end, I'll say, I definitely believe that predictive capability is what's on the furthest end of the maturity scale. Now, there may be something even beyond predictive capability. I just don't know what that is, which is why I said that, right?
Yeah.
But your point here is, what does that scale of maturity look like? So again, on the farthest other end of the maturity scale is not going any further than level 1. And then on the furthest end of the maturity scale, on the other end, is being able to do things like use predictive analytics to kind of make some decisions about what we can expect to see happen based on what we do with our training and learning solutions, how we offer our training and learning solutions, what is the expectation for the outcomes for that, and using predictive analytics to answer those questions. And then that's based on data, and that's based on science. So in terms of that that maturity scale, I've only seen a very few organizations at that level of being able to use metrics and data for predictive analytics in training, learning, and talent development. So it's out there. There are organizations and companies that are doing that. they're really sophisticated. They have sophisticated tools and they have the talent and the staff to do that. But I think that is a place to which we should aspire, because by using predictive analytics, we can get information about what works and what doesn't work. Most important, it helps us stop doing what's not working. Because if there's no data or evidence to support that training and learning is fulfilling its purpose, then we just need to stop doing that, and we need to start doing what works.
Mm.
And predictive analytics helps us do that.
Excellent, excellent. You gave me so many different threads to think about. Number one, you said there are very few organizations who are at that level, which is predictive analytics. Is it less than 1%?
So again, this is just Kevin's estimate.
Yeah.
This is just Kevin's estimate. And so as I think about the conversations I've had with global training, learning, and talent development professionals, what I've seen, what I've read, I'm going to say it's hovering somewhere around 1% or less.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
My guess was great. If we come down maybe a couple of levels, so assuming, we have 5 levels of Phillips and then one for predictive.
Yeah.
If we come down to the impact that we are talking of, which is probably at level 4, maybe 3, if it is behavior or business impact.
We'll call it 4.5.
Let's say 4.5, yeah.
If we're using the ROI Phillips model, it's around 4.5.
Perfect. So how many organizations you find are there in percentage terms, if predictive is just about 1% or less?
Yep. And so then just to level set, so our listeners and our watchers know, what we're talking about is how many organizations do I believe are at that level of being able to use measurement data and analytics to show impact on human performance and business goals, right? I think that's what you're asking. How many
Perfect.
organizations do I believe are there at that level?
Yes.
I'm going to say globally, maybe somewhere around 15 to 20%, maybe.
Wow.
Which is still kind of low, but still encouraging to me, because if you had asked me that question 5 years ago, I might have said 5%.
Yeah. No, 15 to 20% is a good number. And I think that should signal that the change is happening.
It is.
Good news from there. And
it is.
It can only get accelerated as these 15% organizations talk about their case studies and successes, and more people get inspired by, reading those and learning from those. And of course, change agents like you spreading the word around. I think we may see just not so much of a snowballing effect, though we would hope it can become that, but some sort of a growth over there. Excellent.
I am seeing a tremendous amount of effort toward measuring impact for training and learning in a way where we are producing data and evidence that shows how training and learning is either moving performance or sustaining performance. And then ultimately how that movement or sustaining performance is impacting business goals. I'm seeing more of that. I'm definitely seeing more. So I'm just going to be very curious to see where we are 5 years from now. Because I'm wondering if what looks like 10 to 15% of organizations doing it today will look more like, 20 to 30% in 5 years. I hope so.
Yeah. Maybe more, because
maybe 50%. Hope springs eternal.
All right. So for these organizations, which is 15-20% organizations, have you seen they're using specific tools, or is it just people and maybe what we discussed earlier, a good culture, but are there specific tools that they're using which are different from others who are not yet reached those levels?
Well, I don't know that there are any specific tools. I've seen tools, right? Because there are multiple, there's multiple technology and tools that supports analytics, right? And so I don't know that I'm seeing a trend for any particular tool. I mean, I might say, I see a lot of people using Tableau, for example. I'm seeing more people use Power BI, for example. But just in terms of, tools that I'm seeing emerge that may be getting more traction than others, I'm not seeing anything like that. And that's okay. What I like about that is the idea that, on some levels, measuring the impact of training and learning is tool and technology agnostic, which means that there are multiple ways in which you can do it. So you're not limited by a specific tool or specific technology. And I think that that's the good thing. So, again, to answer your question, I'm not seeing any trend or movement toward a particular tool or particular technology that supports, measuring the impact of training and learning. I am seeing more utilization of data warehouses, though, because that's a point at which you can pull in, different data from disparate sources and combine it in combination with learning data and analytics to try to tell that story. So, that's an emerging trend, the use of data warehousing to be part of that data analytics process. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. And are you seeing a higher instance of XAPI being used by these organizations? Because I believe it can give you much, much, much better data. Quality of data.
Yeah, so there was a period of time, maybe 2 to 3 years ago, where utilization of learning record stores and XAPI was just really on the rise, really on the rise. And it looks as though it's kind of plateauing now.
Yeah.
I'm not exactly sure why that's happening, but I just expected to see an ever evolving increase in utilization of learning record stores and XAPI. So I'm just seeing now where it's just kind of leveling off. Is that a good or bad thing? I don't know. But that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
But within XAPI, I mean, if I can just go take another question on that, I believe XAPI is more about a philosophical change than just a technological change. Believing that all learning comes from LMS and we need to track completions, etc., is something that is associated with, let's say, SCORM-based learning. XAPI kind of frees you up a little bit. You can track interactions, you can close the loop, like you said earlier, in terms of improving the program, etc., and changing things when needed. Are you seeing there's a difference in the way people implement XAPI between these 15-20% organizations versus the rest, if you have gone into that area and analyzed that?
Yeah, I can't speak to that. So, I have to be very honest about that. I have been part of one, or actually it was 2 XAPI experiments, right? And the purpose for each one of those experiments was around elevating not only the data capability that you get from learning record stores and XAPI, but also elevating the learner experience.
Yeah.
Because of the way in which you can design with XAPI.
Right.
So that's been my observation. Again, I haven't done a lot of work with XAPI and learning record stores. Again, I was a part of a couple of experiments, but that's the extent to which I've had exposure to learning record stores and XAPI. Yeah.
Excellent. One last question for you, Kevin.
Yeah.
You got upskilled from not knowing too much about learning analytics and reached where you are. Anything that you can share with fellow colleagues who want to get into learning analytics, but have not really dabbled in it? How should they get started? Where would you direct them?
So what I would recommend someone do who is interested in getting into learning analytics and impact measurement is dive in. Those 2 words, dive in. And one of the ways in which you can dive in, I believe, is by selecting a project, a learning project, a learning solution. Maybe not one that's real big or real visible, because you want to start small if you are new to the space and as someone who wants to get some hands-on experience with learning measurement and learning analytics. So I would say select a training or learning program that is a good candidate for you doing some experimentation with collecting facts and evidence and data about that particular program that ultimately helps you be able to tell a story about the extent to which that training and learning solution fulfilled its purpose. And you want to be able to tell that story of purpose fulfillment using, metrics and measurement and data and analytics. So my advice to someone who's interested in getting into this space is to find a training and learning program that you can select as your experiment program. And I would also encourage a couple of books that I believe are helpful for getting started. One book is the 2nd edition of Learning Analytics. And then the 2nd book is Measurement Demystified. So again, the first book, Learning Analytics, 2nd edition. Second book is Measurement Demystified. I think that those are a couple of books that'll give some good insights and create the framework for measuring impact of training and learning. Absolutely.
Fantastic. Fantastic. That's very helpful. Thank you so much. Anything else that you would like to leave us with, Kevin? About
Well,
the challenges, opportunities, anything that comes to your mind.
I'll end with a shameless plug here, because for me, at the end of the day, we can talk about what the challenges and opportunities are, all day long. What I have done is some work that I believe supports our profession in being able to have some successful experiences with measuring the impact of training and learning. And I did that via my ebook called the L&D Detective Kit.
Mhm.
And that is free. It's on my website. So I have the ebook, the L&D Detective Kit, and what accompanies that is the L&D Detective Kit Impact Templates, which makes it actionable. So it's something that training, learning, and talent development professionals can use real time in the work that they're doing right now. So I would invite and encourage our listeners and our watchers to go to my website at kevinmyates.com, where you can download a free copy of the L&D Detective Kit. That's kind of like my gift to the community, which is why I made it free. So yeah, go out and grab a
Fantastic.
copy.
No, thank you for sharing that. We'll include a link to that in the description of this video and wherever we are posting the podcast. And of
Okay.
course, you can find Kevin on LinkedIn. He's very prominently available there and he's very active. So
I'm everywhere. I'm on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. So check me out.
fantastic. It's been a wonderful conversation, Kevin. Thank you so much. Really, really honored to have you on the show. Thank you so much. It was very insightful.
Thank you for giving me an opportunity to talk about what's very important to me, measuring the impact of training and learning. It was a great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.